Hey everyone, welcome back to Ontario Gardening. Today we are going to discuss 3 important pruning tips for your tomatoes that nobody ever really seems to talk about. So we have many videos out there that talk about how to prune your tomatoes, but nobody talks about the when, the why, and the where. So in Ontario specifically, we have a pretty short growing season, and if you don't have the luxury of starting your seedlings inside, then you're going to be putting these right into the ground, starting them from seed, and you need your fruit to get as big and as plentiful as fast as possible. So I will show you quickly how to prune at the end, but let's just talk about the 3 most important things about pruning tomatoes. So the first is why. Why do you prune them? I'm sure if you're here, you kind of already have an idea as to why, but quickly going through, it's because we want our fruits to be as big as possible. We've got a bunch of stuff down here at the bottom that's wasting energy. So when your plant is producing stuff, it's throwing out energy up into the fruits and the flowers. But if you've got all this stuff at the bottom and you got all these wasted foliage, then you're directing energy to that instead of the fruits, and so you want to just get rid of that and clear that out so the energy goes back up into where we want it to go, and that is to obviously our tomatoes. The second question asked a lot is when. When should we be pruning our tomatoes? And the answer is pretty easy. You can prune them when they're flowering. You can prune them when they have fruit on them. The only time you don't want to prune them is if they're any less than a foot or 2 tall. So you want to wait till they're at least a foot or 2. Anything before that, it's possible that you'll shock your plant and they won't bounce back or produce fruit at all. So make sure that you just give it some time to establish itself, establish its roots into the ground, and get nice and tall and sturdy. And the last question is where. Not only where on the plant, but where on the plant in terms of vertically, where do you want to prune? And the answer is anywhere below the first set of flowers. So on this, we're going to look at this plant here. The first set of flowers on this plant is right here where the fruit has started. You don't want to start hacking away anywhere above that, because you're going to start taking away from the fruit and the flowers, and essentially it's possible you might even ruin your crop. So these are just little cherry tomatoes. They are chocolate sprinkles, so they're going to be a dark, deep colored tomato, obviously the size of about a cherry tomato. And so we are going to prune down here at the bottom. So the last important thing being where is not only where on the length of the plant, but where on the actual plant itself. And you've probably heard the term sucker before. If you haven't, that's what we're pruning off. So let's get started on that. I will show you very quickly. And then that will answer your 3 most important questions of pruning tomatoes. So this kind of works. This is the perfect tomato plant to show you this on right now. So you are finding the main trunk of the plant. So this is your main trunk. So think of this as your body. Now you're going to find its secondary. So think of this as your arm. So you've got the main trunk of your body, and then you've got your arm extended out here. And here's your armpit. And that's what they call the armpit of the plant here. And then here is your sucker in the middle. So this is essentially a plant that's trying to start itself again, but we don't want to waste our energy in there. We want to get rid of that. So there's 2 ways you can do that. You can either just pinch it off, or you could prune it off with a pair of shears or scissors or whatever you want to do. So again, I have followed the trunk, I found the arm, and I found the little node in between that we don't need, but I haven't gone any higher than my first set of flowers. So we could do that again on the plant next door here. You see its main trunk, you got its arm here, and here's a sucker. So we're going to pull him off. I also just want to add quickly before I forget, there are 2 types of tomatoes. There are determinate and indeterminate tomatoes. Determinate tomatoes means that the height of the plant is determined. So those are, you see those a lot with your beefsteak tomatoes or your slicers. They're not going to get higher than a couple feet because the plant's genetics have been determined to only grow so high. The other type of tomato is indeterminate tomatoes, and those ones are indeterminately going to grow. There is no height. They can get 2 feet, they can get 4 feet, they could get 7 feet. So these cherry chocolate sprinkles, are indeterminate tomatoes. So these are going to just keep growing and growing and growing as long as the sun and the nutrients are getting to them. So the other thing to note about pruning tomatoes when you are doing determinate versus indeterminate. So if you have determinate plants, you could essentially plant a bunch of determinate varieties beside each other, and they're only going to get so big, and you don't really have to worry so much about pruning in terms of spacing. Of course, you want to prune to get the best fruit, but spacing wise, it doesn't matter. Now with indeterminate tomatoes, because they can get so out of control and so tall, pruning is really important for spacing. So this little piece of information, I guess, is good to know when you're growing indeterminate tomatoes. If you're going to prune your plants, you can get away with having 1 foot of space in between your indeterminate tomatoes. If you do not plan on pruning, that is fine, but you need at least 3 feet in between each plant. So pruning definitely helps in terms of spacing too. If you have a little bit less space, or you want to take up less space and put more plants closer together, you need to prune, or you should want to prune just to save that space. So you're going from 3 feet space to 1 foot space, and that is huge, especially when you have a small garden. And if you're wondering why spacing is important, with tomatoes, they love sun. They love the airflow that they get with the wind. So you want to make sure that all of the branches and all of the fruit are getting sun. It's getting proper airflow in between all the leaves, because otherwise that's how disease starts. You get your things like your blight and your pests live in there, and we don't want any of that. Tomatoes are pretty tender, and they can disease and die really quickly. So tomatoes aren't something you really want to mess around with when it comes to spacing. You want to give them that space to grow and to flourish. So pruning is pretty easy. These are out of control. Everything is spilling out of my bed. We had a really windy day and all of our staking kind of let loose. So we are going to come out here. I'm going to prune all these guys real quick, and then I am going to bamboo stake them in all 4 corners, and we're going to tie them up. So that's what we're doing in this windy day of ours. So that is it for the 3 most important aspects of pruning tomatoes. Yeah, we will come back for our garden tour soon. July, August, we've got all of our jams coming up. So like and subscribe if you're interested in more gardening tips here in Ontario, and we will talk to you later. Bye.